Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council, navigating the human experience together.
Hapaday, Dero, and welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. Our topic today is family histories in the Marianas, and our guest is Herman Tenorio Guerrero, better known as Jun Pan, better known as our very own genealogist, in a way, here in the islands. Uncle Herman, buenas.
She's responsive for inviting me to this.
No, thank you for making time. A lot of people know you as the person who digs through all the records to learn about family trees and all that. How did you first become interested in doing this? How long have you been doing it?
I started out since about 1990. I was working in the Washington office for 10 years. If you remember, since the beginning, I worked for Eddie Pangilinan. And then I subsequently worked for Furlan. So a total of 10 years I worked in Washington. And then afterwards, after I came back, I heard that the Camacho family, or the clan, has a family reunion. And so I was inquiring, I says, did they do, I was kind of curious. Who are my relatives, and other than my immediate families and perhaps extended families, But then they said no. I believe they only did the tree, the main person, and the wife and their kids. And that's it. After that, there was nobody below that. So I says, okay, let's start with my mom. And so I start doing that, and after a while I says, my mom is married to my dad, so I need to include that.
You got to be fair.
Yes, but then as it goes down to the next generation, you say, okay, they're married to this family, so you want to know also their background. So I says, one day it's just like, okay, how difficult would it be to do everybody on island? And at first I says, okay, let me just do the Chamorro site first. But then I decided after, at the time I figured that in 1990, I don't know what was the population, but I think it would have been less than about 60 or 70,000, people. So I says, that shouldn't be that difficult to do.
To track.
Yeah. So I says, okay, where can I find the source of information? And that is a challenge. And basically, I self-taught myself. There are people that go to take classes to learn how to be a genealogist. And that's a good example. My friend, Juliet Leon Guerrero out of Guam, she went online and she got her degree. But after a while, I decided that a lot of this information, I was also involved with when I came back, I was involved with the museum and the Humanities Council. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to figure out, where are the sources of documents that I can look at, other than the Spanish documents of the Marianas. And
apparently you found a lot of
and as a
resources.
result, because of my connection with the humanities, and I used to go to one time to the Philippines frequently, and I went to the Philippine National Archives. So I was asking them, can I look in terms of the Spanish documents that they have of the Marianas?
And did you find genealogies there?
You'd be surprised. Not only that, but you find the people that came to Guam and the Marianas. But at the same time, sometimes you run into people that Chamorros that came to the Philippines. And so those are the older ones, you know. So it's historically, if you look at it, you know, the Philippines. So considering that back then, Spanish documents. So even if you have an official documents out of Guam, you don't have Xerox paper. No, I mean Xerox machine back then. So you do multiple copies, and one is kept on Guam, one by the persons that, you know, if they're doing something that they need an official documents, and another one that they compile and send it to the Philippines. So they kept it in the Philippines. And as a result, you know, going forward, no, I decided, okay, since I've been going to the Philippine National Archives also, no, I decided to get the humanities to fund the retrieval of duplicate copies of the Spanish documents that we can place at the Commonwealth Archives. So the first batch was first applied by the museum, because at the time I was also appointed by the by then Governor Tenorio as member of the Board of Governors for the museum. So I asked them to apply for that grant through the humanities, and so the first batch, we got one of the professors, see Dr. Augusto de Viana, and he's been here because he has done a presentation of the of the Marianas history, and Dr. de Viana. So he was contracted out by the humanities to do the first batch, and then the second batch was done by Carlos
Madrid, I'm
Madrid.
assuming. Where, other than the Spanish record, where else here in our islands can people find their family histories?
And that's the other thing that I asked myself, where else can you find? So the next one was, I said, the church. The church, the mission here in Saipan was established in 1856. Prior to that, the mission was 50 years earlier, was established in Rota.
Oh.
So in the early, and so the mission in Rota oversees the rest of the Marianas up north, until in 1856 there was enough populations of the Chamorro that migrated from Guam to here, and so they asked the superior on Guam if they can establish a mission here. So that's when they officially established the mission over here in 1856. So the mission here, the first book is still around.
From 1856.
56. They still have the books.
Where?
In the church.
Whoa.
The Diocese of Chalancanoa has, the cathedral has those books.
Records of who got married, who was baptized.
Yes. And
who was born.
So so that is the primary source. The question is, how do I access that? And at the time I was asking the late Bishop Camacho to allow me to access it from a historical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And at first he was reluctant. I mean, it took me, I think, over a year or two to get him to agree. So I don't know whether you remember, see, Father, the Jesuit priest that used to serve here in Garapan.
Father Gary, I never.
Yeah, the
sure.
Jesuit priest. He passed away. I think he died, saying mass over here. Yeah, Bradley. Yeah,
Oh.
Gary Bradley.
Okay.
And so I talked to him and I says, can you do me a favor and is there a way that you can convince the bishop to allow me access to the records? And so basically, and I pointed out that I says, and a lot of these records will record also death and birth, marriages, everything. So he talked to the bishop, and finally the bishop allowed me to have access to the church record. So I went through the entire books that they have.
How many books do they have?
Well, from 1856, you have separate books for birth, death,
Baptism.
well, baptisms and birth is
okay.
the same book. Marriages, those are things that they used to have. So they're different volumes.
Mm-hmm.
And when the museum was first opened, we collaborate with the diocese to allow us to have access to some of the older artifacts that they might have. So they allow us to display the book two but in the Chamorro they call it canonical. It's the big book. It's a very thick book made out of leather, and so we display it. And but it's painfully over the years. I still have notes, and I still have series of books, stack of books that I still have that I haven't disposed of in terms of my notes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, it's when you're doing birth dates, you have to understand that the concept of knowing your birth dates might be different the way you look at it now than the way it applies back then. It's just,
How so?
Well, birthdays is really unimportant.
That's true.
They say, remember that coconut tree there at the boundary? That's I planted that when so and so was born. So it's not a big issue.
What day on the calendar?
Yes,
you were
because
born?
sometimes
Yeah.
when I did all these things and start publishing, family would say, are you sure you're my dad's date of birth? I says, why? He says, this is what we have. And I says, no, but let me re-verify.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go back to the church record, and I says, no, I'm still correct. He says, but how come we celebrating his birthday on this day? Like, well, the priests and those that works at the chancery or the cathedral, even the priest makes mistakes because they might not understand Spanish, and so they mix between the day they were born and the day they were baptized.
Oh.
So I
Which
said,
could be about 30 days difference, I think.
not necessarily in the old days. As soon as the baby's born, they try
really?
to.
I thought it was like
No,
after 30 days.
that's a new concept
Oh, okay.
with the church. But back then, it's just
Oh, right away.
you baptize 1 or 2 days as
Yeah.
the mother is ready. Then the family, then the baby's baptized.
Mm-hmm.
But you find a lot of information in the church record, but I understand the bishop's reluctance.
Mm-hmm.
But after going through, because we went from the Spanish, the German, the Japanese, and then the American, so you they're all slightly different. When the German came in, they have printed books that they just write in information. Prior to that, the Spanish basically writes everything down by hand, and a lot of times they depend on people that lives over here, because the priest that is assigned do not know everybody. So what they call sacristan, they work for they volunteer with the church, and so they're the one that writes it down, and then the priest will review it, and so he will sign once he agrees with what they wrote in. But the sacristan, I mean, it's those are the books. So the sources of primarily is the church record. No, that's a major one. Other sources of document is the land records from the German period.
And those are found where now?
In the, I don't know whether the archives are good. No, because unfortunately, unfortunately, our archives are not up to par these days, and some of it they did the microfilm, but it's in poor quality. But the Germans records were translated also. And were used by the Japanese, because a lot of those land records, the Germans is the one that institute land titles.
And so those records contain like family, who's married to who, or who's the son of who, or
it's what you find in there is basically, even during the Japanese period, is that when they lease land, the person or they sell land to the sugarcane company, they need to submit a small biography. So the person that submitted his small biography will indicate the year, where he's from, or where is she from, and then their date of birth, what is their primary of education. Very simple bio, but it's incorporated in the land
that
records.
Transaction. Wow.
So those are things that you use also, because you're getting additional information, and so when I do genealogy reports, if they don't ask for details information and where I get my sources, then I just give them basically the date of birth and death or marriages, and but I don't insert my notes or the notes that I've gathered from other places. But those are the things, and ultimately, when the birth certificates were still at the recorders, because they used to do the birth certificates, and then they record it at the judiciary recorder's office. But that has been transferred up, I think, in 2005. So all those birth certificates, deaths, and marriages, perhaps during that, going back to the naval administrations, I went through all of those also.
When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about I want to ask you, what are some of the things you've noticed about our community that have changed, or that were very prevalent back in the day in the records, and that you don't see so much today? I think that would be, is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. We'll be back after this break.
Looking for resources about Marianas history, culture, and more? Well, check out the Northern Marianas Humanities Council's collection. Our extensive video, audio, and photographic library can be found on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram at 670 Humanities. Or check out the written resources on our website at nmhcouncil.org. And for those who prefer a good book, we also have a selection of local publications for purchase. So, dive in, explore, and share your comments as we navigate the human experience together.
Welcome back. We're chatting today with Herman Tenorio Guerrero, better known as Jun Pan, about Marianas family histories. You're the expert, Uncle Jun. You're saying you've had an encounter going through a book of death.
Yes, the church records on the Book of Death during the early German period, and I heard from the elders that during the 18 and early 1900s, there's an epidemic that hit the island, and I says okay, but then when I went through it, I could only sit like for 2-3 hours, because it's I get anxiety, and it's just like I couldn't believe on a daily basis there were like between sometimes 3 to 7 people dying, and it hits the younger ones, the younger generations, and the elderly.
Oh wow!
And and then it makes sense, because when we have the COVID, and they were talking about the pandemic worldwide, that's the period that it hits also Saipan. And it basically decimated a lot of the population, because what's interesting about it is sometimes some parents is burying a child. By the time they got home, the mother passed away,
Oh.
or a sister or another child passed away, and it's just like very eerie. It took me a while to finish that book.
Because you really can see life.
Yes, because it's
Sliver of life as it was.
Yeah, because it's and sometimes we take things for granted nowadays. With the pandemic, the COVID. People passed away, but when you see that it hits a small populations, and that sort of unmanageable to think about it, because it basically dissipated and basically touched every members of the families on island. But anyway, after that one, when I was doing the genealogy, I just want to mention that I started out with the Chamorro, but as the Chamorro start marrying into Carolinians, I decided, okay, let me include the Carolinians, so I did that. So my database is not just about the Chamorro, but it also with the Carolinian communities. And I've been called up by the court. Actually, I've been certified by the court to be an expert in as a genealogist, because of land title and Carolinian custom. I've been called to the court to explain the relationships of the people based on my research.
Well, you would be the person to do that. How has this work molded you as a person? You've been doing it 35 years now.
Actually, since the beginning, I was using a program, what they call Family Tree Maker. It's been around. My latest version is still like 2019. I signed up last year for the version to 2024, because they don't make it every year, but I'm still waiting for it to be sent to me. But the database, you enter the informations in this program, and it stays in the program, and you can add information, you can add pictures, medias, whatever you want to put in. But if you're going to generate a report, you can do it, but it depends on what they want to see. So I tailor it to the people that if they just want a glance of their family history, and the good part of it, you can do besides what they call a person's report, which is just an individual, and it just basically lists if they have any kids, all the kids, the siblings, and their marriage information, and perhaps their parents, or they can do a descendants.
And how much money do you make from this, Uncle Jun?
Actually, I have. I need to start charging because I really haven't charged anyone.
I know, that's why I asked.
And it's a lot of work, and it's at one time, one of the former board member of the humanities wants me to give it to the humanities. I says, I'm not sure that I want to give it to the humanities because
Your database.
It's a labor of work, and it's
a labor of love.
Love, and I continuously input, and so I look in terms of the media, newspaper, whatever being published. I look at those and try to save a clip trying to figure out who's who, or did I miss anyone. The only thing with my database is if somebody is born outside, or got married, or got divorced, or die somewhere else. If I don't hear it, or it's not published on island, then I wouldn't know.
So it's important if people would like to contribute to your database to give you the information.
And basically I tell them, I says, look at it, and if you need, if there's any additions, corrections, or misspell how your name, because sometimes people say, that's not correct, you said. I says, yeah, but that was in your
birth certificate.
Original birth certificate. Unless you go back and correct, I'm not correcting. But then even if they correct, I will still put it,
make a notation,
an additional notations that this is the preferred name that you go through, and then I indicated the source, because when you're doing genealogy or family history, it's good to keep record where you get your sources.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't, then it's very difficult to verify, or some people just, out of the blue, you just came out with the figures. No, I documented where I get all my sources, and that's really necessary to do that.
Uncle Jun, I want to thank you for sharing with us today, and I want to thank you most especially for the important work that you have done as a labor of love for our community. I think people would be interested to know where they could contact you, and do you have any final thoughts before we go? Most people just by word of mouth, and normally when I produce a report, my name and my phone number is listed in my email. My phone number is listed on those reports. So by sharing it, within the last month, I got more than, I think, 4 or 5 requests that I haven't sent. If all else fails, look for you at breakfast at Herman's Modern Bakery, your family bakery.
That's true. They can just ask and to pass a word, or they leave their phone number, and I'll get back to them.
Yes, you do.
But it's family history, whether you call it, when you say genealogy, it just doesn't mean much. But when you talk about family history, it means about how do you finding out the history of the family. What did my parents did back then? What did my grandparents used to do? What are some of the challenges they face back then? You write those things, so you make the history. It's not, the family history is not about the now. It's good to know about those information, but think about the future, your kids in the future, the next generations, down the line. If you keep something around, and then that will be good, because they don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so I encourage at one time I was trying to get the archives to have a section on genealogy, but they were not receptive in the past, and so Joten Kijo reached out to me, and I says, okay, perhaps if I generate report, I can shoot off a copy of that report to you guys so you can keep it, and that way it will work. At least people can go over there and look at it. But not only that, but at one time, my work, 30 years, because I had a grant from the Spanish government, the Cervantes out of the Philippines, to buy a laptop. And so the deal was that I was going to share my findings with Micronesian Area Research Center, and so I reached out to them after inputting a lot of information and generating reports, but they were not set up. So then I did a couple of times, wrote to them, and says that they're still in the same boat. I says, okay. So I wrote back to Cervantes. I says, I try my best, and since they don't respond, so they finally says, it's okay. The fact that you try is good enough. It's not your fault that they're not ready or they're unwilling to accept anything. And what's interesting is that I help also through Mark, because sometimes people with the Chamorro Land Trust on Guam, sometimes the grandparents were living here. So they need to, and they migrated back to Guam, so they need certifications that their parents were originally from Guam, which those things were noted in the church records. So I would send certifications and put where I got my sources, and so they managed to be eligible to participate in the Chamorro Land Trust.
Thank you again for your work, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you. I know that we put this off for a while, but I'm glad. I mean, you can sit around and talk for hours and hours about genealogy.
Especially
and
you.
It's just, there's so much things to talk about. I did, people always ask me and continuously ask me for questions. Who's this person? Is there connections? Do you have this person in your database? And I says, okay. In fact, I just forwarded another one of the requests this morning, that they're trying to get for the family. But it's good. Even my family from the Tenorio side, the next generations, they're working in terms of trying to have a reunion. I think in July. I think the Acosta family also is trying to do. But if and the thing that we never cover is where are all these people coming from? So if you're a Palacios, you actually came from Iloilo, okay, the Philippines. So the person that came over here married to De La Cruz, and that they're all descendants of this one guy. Lucio Adan also from the Philippines. All the Adans are one family here in the Siena Mine. There are other families here that their origin came from the Philippines.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
Well, the story continues.
All right. It's okay. But,
Our guest today has been Herman Tenorio Guerrero, better known as Jun Pan, a genealogist here in the Marianas, helping us keep track of our family histories. This has been your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
Your Humanities Half Hour has been made possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Democracy demands wisdom. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities. For more information or to share your thoughts, contact the Northern Marianas Humanities Council at nmhcouncil.org or on social media at 670 Humanities. That's 670 Humanities.